Welcome to the Mom and podcast. We're your hosts, Suzanne Kearns
and Missy Stevens. We want to help you through everything that happens in the ellipses, from your professional life to your emotional health.
You're a mom and so much more. Let's figure out what comes next together.
Welcome to the Mom and podcast. I'm Missy Stevens, mom and writer, foster care advocate, and today a 16th birthday planner.
Oh,
how
fun.
Is that possible?
I know, they were babies.
Yes.
And I'm Suzanne Kearns, mom and writer, LGBTQ and sex ed advocate, and today a Mom and Media LLC tax preparer. So I'm really sorry, Missy, but I think we might be going to jail. So get a manicure, get your legs
I'll get my
waxed.
stuff organized.
Yeah, whatever you need to do, get your papers in order.
Okay, good. Good to know. We are so excited that Jennifer King Lindley is on the show today. Jennifer is a mom and writer, editor of more than 25 years. Her writing appears regularly in Real Simple, the Oprah magazine, Parents, Martha Stewart Living, Good Housekeeping, Health, Family Circle, and many other publications. She has written about everything from rent-a-chickens to fear of clowns. Two things I'm super interested in, but focuses on parenting, psychology, and health. Her book, Find Your Joy, is packed with actionable tips from leading experts in the emerging fields of positive psychology on topics like self-compassion, finding your purpose, savoring, gratitude, everyday mindfulness, and the book is just so beautiful. So beautiful.
Pretty.
Yes. She graduated from Dartmouth College with a degree in English and has an MA in English literature from Boston College. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here with you.
We are so excited to be talking to you, and we're so excited about this book, Find Your Joy. We are a sucker for a pretty book.
A real.
Yeah. I have a hard time, and actually I should, you know what?
I haven't written in it yet.
I'm doing it right here, Missy. I learned from Brene Brown that when you have such a pretty book like this, sometimes people are hesitant to actually write in it. So what she has people do is, and I'm going to do it right now, you just go in and you actually
imperfection.
She has people do a heart on it. So there's that. And so it means that now you can write. And anything's going to be cuter than that little heart that I just wrote in there.
A great tip.
So we learned a little bit about you from your bio, but no, there is a ton more about your story. So can you share a little bit about, like, what did you want to be a writer when you grew up and how your career started and all the steps along the way?
Well, I was an English major in college, so I knew I wanted to go into publishing. I started my career as an editorial assistant at a magazine now long defunct called New Age Journal. And it was set in like an old warehouse behind a McDonald's above a leather and fur shop. So it was a strange place for a new agey publication.
Oh my goodness.
I love it.
The ads, I recall, were very woo-woo, as you would expect, like crystals, channeling. But the editorial, the stuff we wrote about, was considered sort of fringy then, and now it's mainstream. Mindfulness, the body-mind connection, organic food, environmentalism, all this stuff is like everyday things we all are concerned about. But at the time, it was considered, new agey. So I was there for 10 years. I worked my way up to executive editor eventually. And I always say it was like interning in an emergency room. It was a small staff and there was, underfunded. So we were always like rewriting things at the last minute, going through the slush to see if there was something to fill a hole in the magazine. But I got, lots of practice in writing and editing and met a lot of people that I'm still in touch with today. So I did that 10 years and then in Boston. And then I moved to South Bend, Indiana as the trailing spouse. So at that point, when we moved, we had a toddler, my daughter, Hannah. And 2 years later, once we had settled, I had a second child, my son, Ethan. So during that move, I shifted to being a stay-at-home mother for 4 or 5 years, which my thinking was like, not everybody's going to get self-actualized at once. Dana's trying to get tenure and, little kids having a baby. So I was home and didn't do anything, work related for 5 or 6 years. So that was good and bad. I mean, it was wonderful to have that opportunity to be home, but at the same time, I kept having this dream that I had a horse in a barn that I was forgetting to feed and water.
Oh, like a
like
literal dream. Like this
Yeah,
wasn't
like a dream. Like I would have this
Okay.
recurring dream, which sort of said to me,
Wow.
like there's something I'm not taking care of. There's something I'm not nourishing.
Oh. Now, do you think you were more in tune to listening to that message because you had been kind of immersed in this world of this, not the woo-woo, but the, thinking about these things?
I do. I am really interested in dreaming. I've had the chance to write about it over the years. And, there's a lot of different theories about does dreaming really mean anything? But I
Mhm.
think there is a consensus that if you can harvest it for the meanings you bring to it during the day.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
anytime I have a recurring dream, I pay attention to it.
I just
Yeah.
told Missy I've been having dreams about vacuuming. So I think that is the world telling me that it's time to clean the house.
Yeah,
It's
well,
pretty bad when you're dreaming about vacuuming.
For like the last year, I have consistently dreamed that I've forgotten Christmas. Like it's Christmas Eve
Oh.
and I have not done anything. And I know it comes from some sense of not feeling prepared, but
mhm.
I'm not sure what it is I'm not prepared for. I haven't quite figured that out.
Well,
But my
clearly
whole life.
Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah, no,
who's
and
your horse then? Who's your horse? And
well, I was dreaming of my childhood horse, so I didn't actually literally have a
Mm.
horse at the time to be neglecting.
Mhm.
But to me, it was, there was something that wasn't
Something.
being fed,
Mhm.
that was nagging at me. So I guess I'd say it was great to be home, but I also felt sort of something was missing
Yeah.
by doing that
We
full
get
time.
that.
I just think there was like 5 years I never got in a state of flow,
Mhm.
like where you
Mhm.
never just kind of lose yourself in a thought. It's always like,
Yeah.
the next crisis.
That's such a good explanation of it.
It is definitely life with small people in your house for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
Yep. So when my son started kindergarten, horses are a theme here. The first piece I wrote as a freelancer was for Family Fun magazine, and it was an essay about getting back into riding once my daughter took lessons.
Uh-huh.
I had like good mom, schlepped her off, was watching her ride around in this, friendly old quarter horse school horse, and I'm like, I want to be up there.
Yes.
Um,
I
so
love that because yeah, we do. We talk about that all the time. We spend so much time trying to explore our kids' interests and seeing what
about
they're
us?
into and letting them test things out. And we don't often give ourselves the permission to do that.
Mhm.
hmm And I mean, a good thing about living in South Bend, Indiana, the cost of living is such that I could take riding lessons myself. I wasn't living in
Ah.
Boston anymore.
Right.
Location, location, location. So I wrote about that and just going from watching her on the sidelines to getting back up in the saddle after 20 years of not riding. So from there, I started freelancing for parenting titles. Then as the kids got older and I got less interested in parenting psychology, I started writing for more on health and wellness for Real Simple and other titles. And now I focus mostly on wellness and health, relationships, psychology, including positive psychology. I spend a lot of time talking to researchers and psychologists and then translating that into actionable, accessible stuff for readers. So I've been doing that since, for 15 years. I was remote before remote was even cool.
You're a trendsetter.
Pioneered the remote work.
So that's what I'm doing. And then in 2019, Hearst, who publishes Prevention, approached me to write a guided journal. And I was, very, very excited for that opportunity. And I wanted to focus it on the field of positive psychology because there's so much interesting stuff that can really make a difference in people's lives if they practice it. So that was a great experience.
Yeah, we want to talk a little bit about positive psychology. We had a guest on, Ann Emig, who
Mhm.
focuses on positive psychology, but I still think it's a term that a lot of people are not familiar with. We really hadn't heard it before talking to Ann. You're the second person we've heard it from.
A
So yeah, we're on
Yes.
trend now. So if you can tell our listeners a little bit about what is positive psychology and how does it differ from other approaches to something like finding your joy?
Yeah. So traditional psychology is focused on, to grossly simplify it, to focus on making you feel better if you're feeling sad, anxious, depressed, or working through problems in your relationship, in your life. And thank goodness for regular traditional psychology. I've certainly benefited from therapy over the years myself, but positive psychology takes a different approach. The founder was Martin Seligman at UPenn. The idea behind it is there are interventions and practices that are skills that we can learn that will help us not just feel not bad, but to flourish and thrive. And the research, they study these things like gratitude, self-compassion, which I love, savoring. These are steps and practices you can take that can actually lift your mood if you're disciplined about it. So it's really about how can we be better than well. We don't have to be satisfied with just being not feeling terrible. We can, practice resilience and thrive even during difficult times.
Oh, I love that. That's a beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah,
and
it's a great explanation.
I think one of the things that we had talked about with Anne, and I'm still want to make sure that listeners have a clear idea about this, is the difference between, like, we've heard of toxic positivity, where it's just like, no matter what's going on, just put a smile on. So the difference between positive psychology and toxic positivity, kind of how would you differentiate there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess one way to answer it is when I speak with, for instance, gratitude researchers, I've often talked to them about what happens when life is imperfect. Like, how do you still feel gratitude or savor something when life is imperfect? And the idea isn't just to paste on a big smiley face, because anytime you bury feelings, they just emerge somewhere else. Usually in some way that isn't very, functional. So you can sort of feel feelings, metabolize them, not deny the negative, but actively search for the positive as well. Because as you probably know from talking to previous guests, we're wired to look for the tiger and not the flower, because, our early ancestors that were on the lookout for the tiger survived to reproduce. And the ones that were like, oh, this is such a beautiful daisy, got eaten. So, and even today, what's negative in our lives tends to command our emotional attention because we're trying to protect ourselves. So our brains almost get wired to look for the negative. So in doing things like practicing gratitude, savoring, appreciating awe, you're sort of retraining your brain to shift it away from, a real negative perception of what's going on around you to a more balanced and positive one.
I love the idea of retraining your brain. I think I very eloquently said on a recent episode, I like brain stuff. I really don't know what's wrong with me.
I'm sure that's the name of a college course somewhere.
Brain stuff 101. I love that idea. And we like to talk about specific ways, which you've mentioned a few. I would love to know, is this a practice that you have to do for 6 months to notice a difference? Is it a practice you do for 6 days to notice a difference? Like, is there a general timeline, or does it depend on the individual brain?
I think it will probably help everybody, but it's not like in 3 months, you're going to come out with your brain all dry cleaned. Some people I think are more, start on the more negative side of the spectrum. But I think, like with any practice, the more you do it, the more you will internalize it. And so some examples of what researchers and therapists have told me to do is, it sounds a little cheesy, but I've tried it and it's actually useful. Go and have a gratitude list. So every day you have to find 10 things to be grateful for. And it can be small, like they did such a beautiful job on my cappuccino froth. It doesn't have to be like health and wealth. Right. And one of the people I interviewed even writes a list. She keeps a running list, and it's sort of training your brain, which you like, to be on the lookout for the positive. Yeah. And like over time, that will be your vantage point. Another useful activity is to go on an awe walk. There's a lot of research on the benefits of awe, which is taking time out of like the day-to-day hustle and looking around for things that sort of blow your mind. I mean, that's what they say. Like an example is you're flying, you're looking out the window and you see the earth as a little speck, you see your house as a tiny speck. That's going to put like the typo you made in your email into perspective. Or you can feel awe when you see like a beautiful pattern in nature, or a profound act of kindness. So one of the things that's been recommended to me is taking an awe walk, like leave the phone at least zipped up and out of your attention, and look for just things that to really inspire you as you WALK your DOG. Like this
we had one that learned to spell that.
Oh, okay. This one's a puppy.
She was real smart, and we were like, we have to call it something different now.
But even today, I'm in South Bend, Indiana, and I'm beginning to see tulips just peeking out a little bit, and so just taking the time to look around for the beauty will kind of start getting you in that direction. And it's sort of, you're putting positive deposits in the bank so you can deal with the negative stuff we all have and the world has.
Right.
Oh, I love that.
So it's not toxic positivity in the sense of everything's great, things are as they should be. It's more like things are imperfect. How can I nonetheless feel better and thrive?
There's people who are so prone to doom scrolling, and I'm speaking about myself and Suzanne.
Yes.
I think that's just
Guilty.
so important to be able to take some time and focus on something besides the
Is there a method for, as much as you're looking for the good, to like stop yourself, like Missy was saying, from the doom scrolling? I mean, I know I'm doing it and I know it's not great, but like, is there, I don't know, I need someone to manually come and take my hand off of the phone.
Right. I think you just have to not do that.
I know.
Well, I was talking to a therapist this week about the state of the world, and she said, well, she has put herself on a media diet. Like she says she checks media once a day, like at noon for half an hour. And that's it. Like she has the discipline. She's keeping abreast of things. She's not putting her head in the sand, but she's not just getting roiled up by the constant. And she said, if something huge happened, I would know. People would tell me.
Yes.
That's true.
And
I like that she does it at noon.
Yeah.
Like it's a terrible way to start your day, and it is a terrible way to end your day.
Yes.
So let's just do it at noon, and then you have time on either side of that to get your head on straight.
Yes. And then also, I just want to go back to this awe walk. I just think that's such a beautiful thing, especially because, a lot of our listeners are busy moms. Some of them, have brand new babies, and they're not like in a place where that they can, take off to a spa retreat or, go get a massage or all these things. But just that's something you can do with the kid in a stroller, and maybe even start teaching them the practice from an early age. Be like, hey, let's look for trees that look fun, or clouds that look like patterns, or anything like that. So.
Yeah. And in fact, I interviewed somebody who does eco psychology this was like the beginning of COVID. We were all in our bunkers. Like we had no idea what was going on. She said, even opening the window and finding one bird to look at and really studying it, like looking in detail at its feathers, looking at its activities, even just looking at something out the window and taking a moment to focus only on that can be helpful.
I'm kind of getting flashes of Olga Mecking was one of our guests in her book, Nixon. And so it's basically doing the Dutch art of doing nothing.
With a purpose.
With a purpose. The purpose of doing nothing. And it's similar. Just look out the window at the bird or the squirrel. Gosh, I've been looking at a squirrel all day I'm going to have to post some videos of this squirrel. And I moved a bird feeder way up high on glass so that he could not reach it. But given the fact it is a squirrel, he will Tom Cruise. He'll find his way to get up there. But
my squirrel owes me $60 in bird food.
I know. I would think we have it rigged so perfectly, and we will come out and it's empty.
They got to be full by
we
now.
keep ours kind of behind. We have like a fence and then some green space back there, so we keep it in the green space, and so we can't automatically see. But if we go look over the fence, there's like a huge pile of stuff that they have dumped in the night and that they're now working on because it's much easier than getting it out of the feeder. They're such boogers. It doesn't matter what I've done; they get around all of it.
I have no doubt he is currently out there, like with his little claws on the suction cups. It's a window mounted one, just like, oh my goodness.
Just hearing you talk about like looking at a bird and studying it, I actually felt a release in my chest. Like
Interesting.
just the idea of it. It tells me that there's a lot of value there.
Yeah.
Not even
Well,
looking.
you'll have to report back whether you stop having your Christmas preparation nightmare.
Yes.
I would love to not dream that. I would love for 1 week to go by that I'm not like, oh no.
Here's your step, Missy, to getting rid of that
go.
dream. So I'm showing a copy of Jennifer's book, Find Your Joy, which it is joy. It's joy you can hold in your hand. Literally, this is the cutest little book. You could just hold it in your hand. And it is so beautiful.
Another thing you can do, even if you're busy and have, toting around babies and toddlers, is express gratitude to other people. That also has been shown to have powerful benefits, not just psychological, but health benefits. I did a piece for Health Magazine in November. Gratitude's a perennial in November issues.
Yes.
And like the new super sauce of gratitude is expressing gratitude. So it's, appreciating things on your own internally, writing about them has benefit, but expressing them to another person gives you like the warm feeling of gratitude plus the bonus feeling of connection.
Yeah.
So it can be, good for both of you, but also extra good for you.
I need to show you this book. You need to read this. It's our friend Nancy Davis co-wrote the Thank You Project, and we had an episode with her, and it was basically a cultivating happiness, one letter of gratitude at a time. And some of them were letters that, for herself or that she burned in a fire, but the other ones were this idea of expressing it in the sense that she would send it to someone. And she's shared a really beautiful story of after her father had passed away, he had framed the letter that she had written to him, the letter of gratitude, and just her knowing how valuable that was to him and how much it meant to him. And I mean, and it was just a letter. It didn't take a year to write. It was just a letter, but
that's I'll look for that book. That sounds great.
So
I don't know if she mentioned the Amit Kumar's work at the University of Texas at Austin.
Hey, let's go find him. Let's go find
him. He did a quite study that made headlines a couple of years ago, and the takeaway was people tend to feel really awkward about writing thank yous, but the recipients don't feel that awkwardness. People also worry, I'm not Shakespeare, this is going to be weird. And across the board, the reaction people had was very powerful, positive feelings. Nobody was like, wow, I don't think that was the right verb they should have used.
Yes.
And there wasn't any awkwardness to the exchange. And like, you think about when you've gotten thank you notes, like random thank you notes from people over the years, like that will stick with you for a long time. And a lot of times you can be like, this is why I do this.
Yeah.
Right.
It's such an affirmation to get one. So that's important. Like if great idea, writing notes or an email just about, like, I was thinking back on how you really helped me when my first article and how you were so helpful, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And it's really helped me all these years. If you wrote something like that and sent it, wow, you're going to make somebody feel so affirmed. Also, there's really interesting work on showing gratitude to loose ties or even strangers. If you take a moment to thank your barista or who you see every day, or the mail or the FedEx guy that always carefully puts the box, out of the rain, take a minute and thank them. That's very good for, they'll feel good, but it's also very good for your well-being. Several researchers study the benefits of thanking strangers, not in a smarmy way, but like, I see you, I see what you did.
Just thank you.
Yeah. So that's also not heavy lifting to do, but with big benefits.
Yes.
And I think especially right now, it's hard to feel gratitude every day. And we can so quickly go to this place. I mean, I found myself there yesterday after a couple text exchanges with friends where we were talking about the world, and we were talking about why isn't this happening, and why does it look like this, and oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. I just was like, yeah. When you're in the habit of then turning around and finding these little moments to savor. I think that, I could have more quickly gotten out of that moment of my stomach being in knots.
I'm going to start working that into the text thread. It's just, anytime I feel us spiraling, I'm just going to just all cap the word gratitude.
There you go. There you go.
Well, and Mr. Rogers says, look for the helpers.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I love
which is
that.
pretty profound. And I always think of that every time something terrible happens.
Yes.
I could talk about practicing gratitude all day. And I keep on saying it's the sign from the universe. It's just like, okay, Suzanne, take the hint. Take the hint. Every single coach that you've talked to has said to do this. But one of the other things that you talk about in your book is discovering your purpose, which I think is something that as busy moms, a lot of the times we feel like that is a luxury we don't have the time to get into right now. So, what kind of things do you see holding people back, and how can they take that baby step today?
Yeah. So purpose, I think, the big picture tends to get lost because we're also focused on the small picture. Like, oh my gosh, the cat's out of flea medicine and what's my target list? And then, one time my son needed a jumbuck costume the next day for a play. What is that? I don't know. And he comes home at like 4. So like we tend to just be just going from one thing on the to-do list to the next. And we rarely take the time to step back and think about purpose. And really thinking about your purpose is as simple as saying, I'm going to take a moment and think about, what's important to me. What do I want my life to be about? So I talked to Anthony Burrow. I want to get this right because he's so smart. He's at Cornell and he studies purpose. And he's found just even asking yourself the question boosts your well-being, because you are taking a step back and thinking about what's the big picture to my life and making time to do that. And he describes, I think of purpose like a compass. It's a guiding tool that helps me know where to go next. I'm never at north. I'm always forward looking. When you have a meaningful life aim, you wake up and think, there's something I need to accomplish today. So, and he, as part of his research, he asked people to contemplate the purpose. And his simple prompt is, what do you find meaningful, important in your life? And ask people to, write about it for a few minutes to focus on it. And it doesn't have to be, I want to cure cancer. I mean, if that is, then, you go, but it can be, I want to connect people, or I want to have more beauty in the world, or, I want to be the best mother I can to raise kind children. And once you can begin to articulate it, it actually helps your day-to-day stuff without feeling burned out. Because if you are like managing your kids fighting for the 15th time, if your purpose is, I want to raise kind children for the world, then you can maybe step back and say, okay, how am I going to handle this in a way I can achieve that? Or if you're like, for me, when I think about my purpose, I think my purpose is to use my curiosity to learn and then share that in ways to help people's lives get a little better. So if I think about that, then I'm not quite as stressed out about my deadline, or, having 15 things to do, or if an editor gives me a feedback I don't agree with, just if you have a big picture, then it helps the little stuff put it in perspective and deal with it easier. So another suggestion that has been shared with me for finding your purpose is think about a time in your childhood when you felt like pure joy and enthusiasm. And you maybe aren't going to be like, okay, yeah, I'm going to go build a tree house. That's my purpose.
I was going to say,
maybe
playing Atari, Raiders of the Lost Ark game.
There's your purpose.
That's it.
But it's like,
Good luck with that.
Maybe it's building and being in nature, begin to get some translatable elements that you could maybe think about as your life purpose, or what gives it meaning, or where you're most you.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about core values and the fact that you kind of occasionally need to check back in on those because they can change given circumstances, having kids or getting divorced or the global pandemic. Is it the same kind of thing with this North Star of purpose, where it doesn't necessarily mean that it's static?
I mean, I think so. I think Burrow means it in the sense that if you have a purpose that's sort of like, I want to bring beauty in the world, how you do that might change a lot over your lifetime, but that's still sort of a guiding principle.
Got it.
So it might change in lots of ways. I want to express my creativity. That might change in lots of ways over your life. People have also told me when I talk about purpose, it's okay to make mistakes. Sometimes you find your purpose through trial and error and screwing up and taking wrong turns. So it's not like you're waiting for a message to come down and give you your purpose. Sometimes it's just about giving stuff a whirl.
Yeah.
And
I don't
stumbling
know
into
where I received the message as a young person, but somewhere it came to me that mistakes were not okay. And I do not think it was my parents. I don't, but maybe it is. Mom, Dad, we'll talk about it later and figure it out. But I don't think that's it. But somewhere I got this message that mistakes were not okay. And I always had to know exactly what I was going to do. And it had to be the right thing. And it's really stunted me from thinking about bigger picture things like, what is my purpose? What are my values? And I would think if I was going to define a purpose, well, then that is it. And I have to achieve it, and I have to achieve it in a big way. And instead of any of that motivating me, it really just shut me down because it seemed too big and too overwhelming. And so I love this idea that it can just be a North Star. And we aren't always right there. We always get turned around and we just find our way back.
Yeah, because a compass, to use my English literature master's degree, like a compass as a symbol is there because there's going to be rough waters, because you're going to make wrong turns and you need some redirection back.
Right.
So, mistakes are built into that.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of Stacey Kim, one of our favorite people, Stacey Kim in the Lighthouse Method. So it's this idea, this lighthouse is the idea that, kind of the same thing as the North Star. You can't tell exactly where it's at, but you can kind of see it out there, and you're heading in the right general direction. But it's not necessarily that you know what that thing is. You just know that I'm gonna start heading in that direction and make these little decisions along the way to get there. And so, yeah, I like that idea of this, whether it's your lighthouse or your North Star. But it takes the time to actually sit down and think about it. And I love that you brought up that it actually is good for your well-being to just even ask the question, because I think to Missy and I, the feeling is that if we ask the question, like that's going to start a spiral of like, oh, it's not the thing I've been doing for the past 30 years. So what a big waste of time I've been. Okay, I'm not going to think about that anymore. So like, how do you?
I'm real bad about that backwards looking of like, well, if I'd only known this when my children were, 5, then I could have done so much better. And it's just that whole concept of, a therapist said to me years ago, like, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. And when's the second best time to plant a tree? Today.
Yeah.
I can't go back and plant that tree when they were 5, but I can apply these things.
Well, I think for anybody who feels like existential anxiety, like, oh my gosh, what's my purpose? It needs to be a marquee letter purpose, and it has to be fantastic and impressive. Purpose researchers have also suggested, like, just bring curiosity to the question. Just be curious. What are the moments in my life where I felt most alive? What are the things I've done so far that have made me feel the best? And those are positive things to think about.
Right.
That aren't judging, that doesn't bring judgment or this isn't good enough, that kind of stuff. So maybe if you're feeling some purpose anxiety, then just sort of reflect in a curious way, just those moments where you felt like, wow, this is me. I'm being me. And write about them, that can be one thing. And one of the things we were chatting about was maybe doing a 7-word autobiography as a way to find your purpose. So that's suggested in the book. Mine is, when I played around with it, mine is wanted to be Marguerite Henry, almost there. And where I'm going with that is, as a kid, my fantasy was to be Margaret Henry, who wrote Misty of Chincoteague and all those books. Her office was right over her paddock, and she could look at her horses as she wrote. And I was like, oh, that old. So I didn't quite get, I don't have a horse to look out at, but I've got a lot of animals around me and I am a writer. So like almost there. Maybe I'll find a way to get horses to look out at sometime, but that was fun to write. So writing a 7-word autobiography can help sort of clarify who you are.
Oh.
I mean, it gives me great anxiety. I think I do have some existential woe over this.
No, I think, and I want to tie that in with one of the things you've written about and talk about is the benefits of journaling. And it's kind of funny as writers, I feel like we always feel like our writing time should have this purpose of like something we're going to submit or that it has to be like perfectly edited. So I've kind of pushed it to the bottom of my priority list, but from everywhere from Julia Cameron's morning pages to just, I mean, there's science behind it that there are definite benefits of doing it. And I think that would be a fun thing. That would be a fun first journal prompt is working through maybe that 7-word bio. And it's kind of, that was a fun exercise. Oh gosh. One of my friends was at a writing course where they had you write like a full personal essay or whatever. And then they're like, okay, now cut it in half. Okay, now turn it into a Facebook post. Okay, now turn it into a tweet. And so it was taking this big idea and then boiling it down. So maybe it is, if you're like, oh, I don't know those 7 words, like start big, just ramble. And then from there, cut it in half.
Yeah.
That's genius.
Yeah, that would be fun. Journaling is, did you all keep journals as kids?
Yes, I did. And I loved it.
Where are they now?
I burnt them because they were so
trashed them.
embarrassing.
I think mine are in my mother's attic, and that's terrifying to think of.
Yeah.
Like I used to write pages and pages about my not very exciting life.
Oh yes, lots of poetry, so much angsty poetry I had. Oh,
yeah. So
I
maybe
wrote stories.
Oh, well, see, you could get back into that sort of childhood. This is just for fun mind. There is a lot of research on the benefits of journaling, making like the one that's often quoted. James Pennebaker did a study of college students and had them write about a difficult experience for 15 minutes. I think it was 3 times. He had one group do that, and the other group was just could write about anything. And the group that did the journaling intervention, after even 6 weeks later, rated themselves higher in well-being and went to like the student infirmary less. And, there's lots of thinking about why writing down problems can be helpful, even in an informal way. I think part of it is it gives you some distance from the experience if you're writing about it. Also, I did a piece on narrative therapy, which people are using like journaling as a therapeutic technique with patients, with clients. And I got to talk to Nancy Snyderman, who wrote a book about how, what was it called? I can send it to you.
Great. We'll put it in the show notes.
It's a link, but she said, we are both and she does it as a therapist as well. She's also an artist, but she said, we're both narrator and main character in our lives. And we have a lot of control over how we tell our story. So you can tell, she says, like, for instance, Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. She could tell that story. It was terrible. I went off in a storm. My house got crushed. My dog was hungry. But instead you could tell it as I met people, I learned my strength, I returned, I learned something about it. We have a lot of control over how we narrate our lives. And so in addition to just rewiring our specific thoughts, I think this sort of goes back to purpose, doesn't it? Sort of thinking about a divorce or a loss or a setback in terms of how it was a struggle and what you learned from it isn't toxic positivity. It's really choosing to look at, what strengths or what you learned from it instead of just feeling victim-like.
Icky.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of people, sometimes like there's nothing scarier than the blank page. So I think that's why a guided journal or guided prompts like in the book Find Your Joy are so helpful because it narrows it down a little bit for you. So it still gives you enough breadth to have it. There's some openness there to what you're going to be writing about, but it also reins it in so it doesn't feel
Mhm.
so overwhelming and like you don't even know where to start. So highly
Yeah, I
recommend.
still hate a blank page.
I know they're so scary. And even when these pages are blank, they're still not blank because look at these beautiful, like
pretty
the
things on them.
illustrations and stuff are so gorgeous. So yes,
Yeah. This book
highly
just
recommend.
makes me happy to look at. Like
Aw.
this is like step one some days of like I just feel some gratitude that I have this pretty book sitting next to me.
If you don't have a bird outside, there's some on the cover you can look
The
at.
bird of happiness.
I
Oh,
love
I love it.
it. Oh,
I love it. I feel like we only scratched the surface of things we can talk about. So I really recommend that our listeners go get their hands on the book.
yes.
But where else could they find you?
So I'm a social media dinosaur lumbering slowly over the earth. I'm on Instagram. I got on Instagram when the book came out, and I do post some stuff there. I have a website, jenniferkinglindley.com, and the book is widely available, Amazon and elsewhere as well.
Right.
So that's where you'll find me when I'm not in my dining room.
And your articles all over the place. So, and I think there's some
Yes.
links to those actually on the website too. So we will have links to that in the show notes for anybody who wants to go and check those out. But I think, yeah, it's just about time for the Look, Listen, Learn segment. So if anybody is listening to the podcast for the first time, hello, we're so glad you're here. And the Look, Listen, Learns are time for us to just chat about some of the things that we are watching or reading or listening or learning about. Something you might want to incorporate into your lives. So Missy, just so we don't throw Jennifer right in right away, why don't you go ahead and
Thank
start
you.
first?
All right. Well, yesterday I started The Dropout on Hulu.
Oh,
And
yes.
it's the scripted series about Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. And I find that whole thing so fascinated. I have consumed most of the things written or created about that entire debacle.
Yes.
And it's Amanda Seyfried. I don't know how you say her name.
I don't know.
I'll look that up and put it in the show notes. But she is Elizabeth Holmes. And really, in moments, I find her almost unrecognizable. I thought that's who the actress was, but I had to go confirm it. Because she really just slips into this role. And it's got a great cast, a fantastic cast. It's on Hulu. I think I said that. And I think it dropped all the episodes. I'm not sure, but I made it through 1.5 last night before I was just too tired to do another one. But
Yeah.
I will
And kind
definitely...
of like that Inventing Anna that I was talking about a couple Look, Listen, Learns ago. For people who aren't familiar with Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos, tell me if I'm right. It's like she basically said there was a blood testing service that she offered where like for a drop of blood, they could test you for all these things that usually cost like thousands of dollars for blood tests for.
Right. I mean, she hoodwinked
everybody,
investors, everybody. And
Wow.
the concept of it is amazing. Like how amazing if you could prick your finger and one drop of blood test for
everything,
all kinds of stuff, but they never could make it work, and then kept trying to, lie to people basically. I think it's a really interesting commentary on this. She just had this extreme need to be successful. And I do think somewhere inside her, she wanted to help people. I don't think that wasn't, that wasn't there. It was there on some level, but it was really about being successful. She couldn't even wait to get out of school to start this business. She wanted to be like other billionaires who had dropped out of school to start this business. And she just had this immense hubris of like, of course I am. She is a very smart person, but some crazy mistakes. And
that reminds me of her purpose gone awry, maybe.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. She lost her North Star big time. Like it was more about
where she wanted to be on the star. Like she
wanted to be the star. Yeah.
Her North Star was being big.
Yeah.
She didn't care how.
Oh,
yeah.
interesting. I want to see how she
super
plays
interesting
her.
person. Like how, we could talk about it for hours.
A lot of psychology.
I do kind of fascinate. A lot of psychology behind this person. And then I have her father worked for Enron. And so there's that part to the story. And I just find some weird connections there. And I don't know. I love it. So worth checking out. I can't tell you for sure because I haven't watched the whole series. Sometimes you watch a whole series and you're like, why did I do that? But so far, I think it's worth checking out. And then I am listening to 10% Happier with Dan Harris
Oh, love him.
podcast. Yes. And it's been around a while. I want to say they're on episode 400 and something. I mean, it's that he has full length episodes, but also has what he calls a ridiculous meditation. So I guess he took up meditation after having a panic attack on live television. And so I love the ridiculous meditation episodes. They're very short, 6 to 8 minutes, somewhere in there. But the one that caught my eye recently that I've been listening to is A Serious Case for Humor. And it's a discussion of the importance of humor in business and in life and how it could lead to success. And of course, I love that because I have often felt broken in my life because I look at life through the lens of humor. Like I feel a little cracked in my head, because I'm like, I see something weird and funny in a moment that other people are like, no,
this is not a time to joke.
And so I love this. It's very validating. There's something good about that. So that's me for this week.
Jennifer, did that give you enough time to?
Oh yeah. Well, I guess this goes under watch and read. This week, one of the things I have enjoyed about COVID is Zoom classes and Zoom lectures, especially lectures, because you can just jump in and you can be cooking and you still learn something. So it was a professor at Notre Dame, Dion Irving, gave a Zoom talk this week on her novel Quint. And it was about the Dion quintuplets. Do you know about these?
That is ringing a bell.
So they were during the Great Depression. The quintuplets were born in Canada, and the Canadian government or some subsection that took custody of them and turned them into a tourist attraction. Like they gave them a playground that people would busloads of people would come and observe them. And they were kept that way through till they weren't cute anymore, 10, 11, 12. But it really ruined their lives. The novel she wrote is Quint from their perspective about what that was like. And in her talk, she said something that was really, I think, pretty provocative. She said she was drawing parallels between this sort of exploitation of these quintuplets for commercial gain with our Instagram culture, where everybody puts their beautiful families every day, constant content about the beautiful kids on display for marketing purposes. And it's a pretty tough analogy, but she's suggesting is that somewhat equivalent, selling your kids and dressing them up for commercial gain. So I thought that was really, really something interesting to think of, especially as somebody who, again, Instagram dinosaur, but I have written about my kids over the years in parenting articles. So I'm a little guilty.
I know.
And we go back to the early days of blogging where, I blogged about my kids until they got old enough to say, don't write about this, mommy. Oh, okay.
Stop it.
Well, and now there's as you know, on Instagram, there's influencers and they're beautiful kids, beautifully dressed, perfectly photographed. I can see some of the parallels.
The whole life looks like it fits in this aesthetic. I don't know if it does, but everything is in a color scheme and everybody is perfectly coiffed and
it is a hard line to draw, because I made a decision long ago. I could have been a much more successful mommy blogger if I would have shared pictures of my kids, because I got to tell you, I got some cute ass kids. but I never did that. But I would write stories about them, but from my perspective. But they were still part of the narrative. So, but it was a really hard line to draw about, as far as especially now I'm sharing it here again, but I've written an article about when my son was younger, he struggled with childhood apraxia of speech. And so that was something that it required years of intensive verbal therapy or speech therapy. No one who ever met him today would imagine for a second that this boy struggled to speak. But I think it's an important story to tell, because there are so many people who are in the thick of it, who are like, what does it look like 10 years down the road? But I don't know that as a 12-year-old boy that he wants all his friends at school, being like, oh, what was wrong with you, kind of thing. So it's hard. It is hard. But I do think I don't know. I still can justify that more than I can I don't know, some of the ones that are is so retail. It's so
Mhm.
commercial. It's
Mhm.
so I don't know. I have a really hard time with it. But
Yeah,
me
and
too.
in talking to therapists and doing pieces on anxiety and et cetera, it is also creating this expectation that this is what life should look like as a mom, that it should be
Right.
like picture perfect. And the therapist said, this isn't just like the best, it's like the best of 1,000 photos on the best day,
yes.
not everyday life. But it does create
Right.
more anxiety, more pressure on parents to have this Instagram ready childhood going on.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pressure for the poster and it's pressure for the people viewing it. So
Mhm.
interesting.
Right.
Yeah, so that was a really interesting talk, and I just Amazoned the book,
I
Quint
know. I
by
want to get the
Dion
book. I
Irving.
just wrote it down.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And then I'm watching YouTube videos on how to paint because I'm painting my bedroom. I hate painting, but I'm like, I can do this. I can
Oh,
do
You
this if
can
I.
do this.
yeah. You
Okay.
need to listen to like the last month of episodes because I have been having a month-long struggle with painting my bedroom. So actually,
Oh,
don't listen to that. Listen to
okay.
that after you're done.
After okay, a month-long struggle. Well, now I know what to expect.
No,
So Suzanne was probably high for several episodes
I
because she was
was.
breathing in that trim paint fume.
Oh my
Ooh,
God. No,
trim.
we were trying to bring back a bedroom that had been painted. I mean, we're talking walls, trim, ceiling, everything dark leather brown to
Wow.
a lighter airy room. So I don't think most people have that extreme. They don't need 20 coats to finish off their
I mean, she
project.
painted and painted and painted, but you can
Oh,
paint the walls in a room for sure.
I know.
Okay.
Yes, you can definitely do it. And I've painted every inch of every house we've ever lived in. I'm a
Yeah, me
Oh.
big
too.
fan. Yes. Yeah. So if you need any tips, let me know. I'm really good
Do you
at
need to
cutting
cut in twice?
No,
No.
I only cut in once.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Well,
if they tell you you need to sand stuff, they're a liar. There's primer. There's primer out there.
well, my husband would say you have to sand certain things. He is a purist, but
No.
I have painted over many a thing without much or any sanding.
Yes, I know.
But
Yes.
walls for sure. Yeah. Just cut in once and then
Okay. Thank
then
you.
you can get pretty
Don't-
close the second time.
Yeah, you
Don't
just saved me
bother
several
washing 'em.
hours.
Don't bother washing them either, unless they're super dirty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Wow, this is a
primer
time-saving
Dust
episode
mop
for me.
them.
Spend
Just like-
money. Spend money on the primer. I'm
Mhm.
giving an ad for Benjamin Moore here because every painter that I have used for professional stuff always recommends them. And the day I changed from another brand of paint to Benjamin Moore, I was just like, it like changed the game. I was like, this isn't
Mm.
even painting. This is like, it was so different. Although I have mentioned on a previous episode that the supply is out, just because of the supply
Yeah.
chain issues, ingredients that they need for paint are not readily available. So it was a sourcing issue of like having to drive way to another Benjamin Moore location in order to get, some had semi-gloss, some had eggshell, some had that. Like it was
Wow.
just not
Wow.
everybody had
Crazy.
everything. So make sure you get your paint. Getting your paint is the hardest part of painting these days. All right. So let's see. What have I been looking at? I have been looking at Severance, which is a
Mhm.
new show on Apple TV. So the idea is that these people can choose to surgically divide. They get an implant and it divides who they are between they call it their outie and their innie. So the person who lives outside of the office and then the person who's inside of the office. And like the process of taking the elevator down is when you go boop, and then you change into this work person or your
So
outside
scary.
person. And so, oh my gosh, and it's Adam Scott from Parks and Rec, who's just so funny. He's the main character, and it's his like best friend from his work life mysteriously disappears one day. So he's gone. So they're struggling with like, oh, we miss Petey. But then in his outside life, Petey is there and he is unsevered himself and is
Oh.
trying to communicate this to this guy. And Patricia Arquette is the mean lady who oversees everything, but she's got the most amazing, she let her hair gray or she dyed it gray. I don't know. Amazing. Anybody who's questioning whether or not to grow it out, like
Check out Patricia.
Mm.
yeah, she looks better than I've ever seen her look. It looks amazing.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow.
But yeah, so it's just this very interesting. The reason he had decided to sever himself is because his wife had died and he just didn't want to feel the pain anymore.
Mm.
And so he's like, at least for half of my life, I can be, clueless of this pain and living this alternate life downstairs. But the lady who came and took over for PD is just not into it at all. And she keeps on like trying to, like she was going to cut her fingers off as a sign to her Audi that I do not like this job. Like she's been trying everything to get out of it. She made a video to send to her Audi, and then her Audi sent one back and was like, if you ever try to cut my fingers off again, like, so her Audi is not
So it's really like two different
It is two different people fighting each other, and it is just so dark. And it is it's done by Ben Stiller.
I don't know why I'm laughing at the cutting the fingers.
No, but that was her thing, to get to make the video of herself, because Patricia Arquette just was not having it. Like, oh, and that's the other thing, you can't write notes to yourself.
Oh,
Like, so you can't communicate. There's some type of alarm that goes off, and like, yeah. So, I mean, she's tried everything. So she was like, I'm going to make a video. Let's see. And then, yeah, so it's by Ben Stiller, which is just so funny because kind of like you were saying, the humor in the darkness, Missy, like talk about showing how the funniest people can also have
usually
these
pretty
deep,
twisty too,
dark sides too. So
yeah,
that has been awesome. And then listening, I am not listening to it, but I think I should, based on the success, Headspace sleep casts. So my son has been having a hard time sleeping for, I don't know, a year, it seemed, but it's been like even more in the past few months. And so we've been doing everything. We've been doing deep breathing, and I spritz him with lavender before we go to bed, and we'll, all kinds of stuff. And he still, my husband and I'd be downstairs watching TV, and like an hour later, he'll just come walking through and just getting a glass of water, to go. So finally, I think someone had mentioned Headspace, and I was looking at it for just guided meditations. But then I saw they had a channel on there called Sleepcasts, which are just stories. One of them's read by John Legend, but there's stories about, apparently, I mean, one of them's a flower shop. One of them's he liked the one that was called Cat Marina. And then there's Cat Marina 2. And the same thing happens to me. I listen to my books trying not to fall asleep and fall asleep. And I got to tell you, we did the free trial, and then I saw this bill come through that was like $50 for a year.
It's expensive. Yeah.
Oh my God. I would pay that every
penny
night to have him get the sleep that he's getting. And it's so funny. Also a benefit is I only have it on my phone, because I said, can I trust you with your phone in your room? And he's like, no, you can't.
No, you can't.
I said, okay, good. It's good to know this about yourself. So I have it on my phone. So it takes my phone away from me at night. Not overnight, but like, while, just while we're watching TV or whatever. Yeah. So he has my phone captive in his room while he listens to this sleep cast.
That's kind of great.
We've had 100% success rate for over a month now.
Wow.
And the Calm app has those as well. And they have a bunch of them, a handful of stories that are train journeys. And so it's just, you board the train and it talks about what it's like in the train and what you see from the windows. I have never gotten to the end of a train journey.
I wouldn't even make it in the train.
It's so soothing. And you're like, you kind of hear the tracks.
Yes.
Like out. Love a train journey.
Yes.
Oh, great. I'm going to try those.
Yeah. And they have so many other things too that I need to do. They have, wake up meditations. They have midday meditations. They have all kinds of different things. So really the whole family can use it. And it makes you give up your phone at night. So you can't, I can only doom scroll through CNN. I can't do it more.
Well, and then the stories are great because you can't probably be worried while you're listening to the story. You can't be thinking your own thoughts while you're on a train journey.
Yeah. And there are these, the Cat Marina is like, and then the cat gets on the boat. Even I am like, I gotta get, because I'll set play and then I'll leave his bedroom. I'm like, I feel like I can't even get out of the room sometimes. I'm like, I'm already sleepy. So highly recommend. But I also highly recommend, again, find your joy, y'all.
Yes.
Even I do every page, do every exercise, but even like Missy said, just having it on your desk, it's just so pretty. So get it just to bring you a little bit of joy of looking.
Speaking of aesthetic, it probably looks nice in your room.
Yes, it does. Exactly.
Oh, well, thank you. It was a joy to be here.
Oh, well, yes. Thank you so much. We know how busy you are. And of course, we've kept you a couple minutes late. So we appreciate you being with us.
It's our specialty
today.
Well, I got paint tips and relaxation tips So it was well worth it.
Exactly. We just cut your painting time in half. No prep work, just really expensive primer.
Yeah, just let that paint on the wall.
Mhm.
And
All
in
right.
between coats, just wrap your brush in saran wrap
Yes.
or your
Okay.
roller.
Yeah.
And put
Okay.
you can put it over the tray too. Like you don't have to clean everything up
Clean
and you
it,
don't have to worry
yeah.
about it drying.
I've-
Just saran wrap it and
Oh my
stick them in the
God.
fridge.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm going to
or the
seriously send
freezer.
you a picture. I still have one from like 2 weeks ago that is still right next to my sink in my bathroom. It's perfectly moist still in the
perfect.
saran
Oh,
wrap.
wow.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
great advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Saves you a ton of cleanup time. Then you don't have to clean up until you are finished. with
Done,
the whole
done, done,
project.
done.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
If you have any other questions, just send us a note.
Apparently we're professional painters. We should hire ourselves
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. We work from like 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. and we're semi-tipsy.
And we
while
listen
do
to
it.
our stuff pretty loud. Like we put a show on in the
Mhm.
background.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh. Okay, we're gonna finally let you go. But thank you.
Yes, we gotta
so
run.
much. I appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. So nice to meet you.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for the Mom and podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you know someone else who could benefit from the episode, please be sure and share it with them. And while we're begging, please subscribe and rate us wherever it is you listen to podcasts. You can find links to all the things we discussed today in our show notes or over at our website, momandpodcast.com, with the A-N-D spelled out. In between shows, find us over at the socials, including our private Mom and Community Facebook group. The links to that group and all of our socials can be found at momandpodcast.com. Thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you more than you know. Now go out there and make your ellipses count.